Today we do our weekly takeaways from this past weekend of football. I'm Nathan Gustafson, and this is Clutch Time. Alright, so we'll get things started with our college football takeaways of the week. Remember, every week I'm going to give you 5 college football takeaways and 10 from the NFL. We will start with college, where my first takeaway of the week is that there's a very clear, concise top 5 teams in college football. That 5 being Clemson, Georgia, LSU, Alabama, and Ohio State. Now, I could actually draw a distinction between whoever 4 would be out of the top 4 in Ohio State, but I think there's a gap between Ohio State and the 6th best team in the country, which is probably either Texas or Oklahoma. But look, these 5 there's just a distinction when you watch them play. They all went out and dominated football this weekend, all winning by north of 30 points. All dominant showings from these teams. That's pretty much what's to be expected moving forward. From these 5, I think it's a shame that at least one of them, and likely 2 of them, are going to miss the college football playoff this year. I think that is a crime, and going back to my repeated message on this show that the college football playoff needs to be moved to 8 teams, and this is just a prime example of it, because all 5 of these dominant teams deserve a chance to compete for a national title. My second takeaway is that the Pac-12 continues to prove the haters wrong. Arizona State, a team that I don't think is a top 6 team in the Pac-12, went into Michigan State and upset them on the road. Outside of Stanford, I mention here because Stanford's been a real disappointment for me so far. I picked them to win the Pac-12. But with that being said, there's now 6 ranked teams in the Pac-12, and they just continue to go out and kind of show that they're better than what they're given credit for. Now, what I will say is this. I don't think that any team in the Pac-12 could actually compete with the top 5 teams in the country. With that being said, I think that the winner of the conference, because there's so many teams that are more than competent and able to compete with the vast majority of the nation, I believe the winner of the conference deserves a chance and an opportunity to compete with those teams. I think the Pac-12 is arguably the deepest conference in the country. I'd actually probably still say it's the Big Ten. But we just saw Arizona State beat Michigan State this weekend on the road. I think the Pac-12 is much better than it's given credit for, and that continues to play out week after week. My third takeaway is an overall message about football, and that's that a lot can change week to week. We saw Maryland come out and win by 78 and 43 points in their first 2 weeks, and then they come out this week and lose to Temple. I don't mean to pick on Maryland here. It's just an overall message about football. And this is going to be a recurring theme in this episode, that we jump to some serious conclusions based off of 2 weeks, conclusions that seem to fail once January for the NFL and December for college football roll around. So for that reason, I just want to make this point, and it's a major takeaway for the week, that so much can change week to week. Some teams are going to come out and play great, some teams get hot, some teams have good stretches. But it's the ability to see through what's simply a couple good games and to see what's actually sustainable and can lead a team to a championship. And I think Maryland is just a prime example of how good a team can look and then how they can look the following week. As UCLA gets blown out again by Oklahoma, I just think it's another instance where we see again that Chip Kelly is at least 2 or 3 years away. I actually think very, very highly of Chip as a coach. He's getting a lot of criticism for the performance of UCLA to start the year, and rightfully so. With that being said, though, Chip is a phenomenal offensive mind and a great recruiter. I fully expect UCLA to be back competing in the Pac-12 2 or 3 years from now. But right now, they're just an ugly mess. This roster simply it can't compete with the rest of its Pac-12 opponents, and certainly can't compete with Oklahoma. But I do expect Chip Kelly to turn it around eventually, but he's at least 2 or 3 good recruiting classes away from fixing that UCLA football program. And my final takeaway is this. I wanted to apologize to you guys for not getting my picks out this weekend. I was feeling really under the weather. And actually, though, I do think it was a good weekend to miss, because college football games, man, were they boring. This weekend could not be any more different. We have A&M, Auburn, Notre Dame, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Utah, USC, Oregon, Stanford. There's so many good football games to watch out for this weekend. Very, very excited for Saturday, and I think the season is really starting Saturday. We've seen a lot of top teams just blowing out other top teams. We've had very few matchups of serious contenders playing each other. So far, Clemson, A&M, and Auburn, Oregon over the stretch of the first 3 weeks have been the only real games where you saw competitors going head-to-head, and we have 4 or 5 such games this weekend, games with college football playoff implications happening right now in Week 4 of college football. And my takeaway from this past week is it's time to get serious. If you're any one of these teams, if you're a Utah, if you're an Oregon and you want to win the Pac-12 and get in, if you are an A&M or an Auburn who thinks that you can maybe upset an LSU or Bama, if Georgia wants to establish themselves as a title contender again this year, and if Michigan and Wisconsin want to have a shot at winning the Big Ten. There's so many great games with such heavy implications this weekend, and I can't wait for it. All right, moving on to the NFL, my first takeaway of the weekend is that the Cleveland Browns will win the AFC North. I have to update my prediction here because Big Ben went down for the season with an elbow injury. I think very highly of Ben Roethlisberger, his ability to lead the Steelers. I expected him to have a bounce-back year from last year and lead the Steelers to the playoffs. Obviously, now that is not going to happen without Big Ben in the rotation. I do not believe in Lamar Jackson. I've echoed that repeatedly on this show. The Ravens, despite putting it on the Dolphins, who might be the worst team in the history of football, and despite beating Kyler Murray and the lack of defense in Arizona. Look at this picture right here. It pretty much sums up what Lamar Jackson's had to do. Look at the separation between the tight end and the rest of the team. The defense on the Cardinals just was not very good. The defense on the Dolphins was just not very good. I don't think Lamar Jackson is built for sustained success. I do think Baker is. I do think Odell is. The rest of that receiving core is outstanding in Cleveland. The one question sort of being the offensive line, but we saw Myles Garrett just go crazy on Monday Night Football. This defense is, good enough. I do think that the Cleveland Browns, with Big Ben out, will come away with the AFC North. All right, my second take of the week, Dak Prescott is good. All right, he's probably a little bit better than I ranked him in my quarterback tiers episode coming into the year. I had him right around 20. He's probably closer to 15, 13 than 20. But once again, sort of like with Lamar Jackson, you're overreacting. It's 2 weeks against the Giants and Redskins, both teams who I predicted to win less than 5 games this year. I'm just saying, hold your horses, Cowboys fans. Be realistic about how good he is. He's not Carson Wentz. He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not even Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold. He is a good leader. He is, moderately accurate on short and intermediate routes. I still don't trust him throwing the ball deep. I still don't trust him throwing the ball downfield. I still don't trust him to fit balls into tight windows, but to be honest with this team on the Cowboys, it doesn't look like he's going to have to. I can certainly see them making the playoffs this year. But like I said, there is still limitations to Dak. He can only take a team so far. I don't think the Cowboys have any chance of winning the Super Bowl, and all these people predicting them to do so. I think they're a fringe playoff team still, and I certainly don't think Dak Prescott is worth $35, $40 million a year. That is just complete insanity. But I also don't think that a lot of quarterbacks who get paid that are worth that. So I guess we'll see where it goes, but I think that there is an extreme overreaction in sports media to the first 2 weeks of the season for Dak Prescott. My third takeaway from this weekend in the NFL is that the Atlanta Falcons can win the NFC South. I've said repeatedly I don't believe in Matt Ryan. I've said I actually don't believe in this defense. I think that they escaped with a win solely on Philadelphia's mistakes on Sunday night. If Nelson Aguilar just catches that football and goes to the house, they win. If there's better coverage on the 4th and 1, they win. This is an Eagles defense with a serious problems in the secondary, and Atlanta still needed a great deal of luck to win that football game. But my takeaway is this. They just had one of the tougher games they're going to have all year if they won it. There's no more Drew Brees for the next 6 weeks approximately. That could end up being a little less or a little bit more, but approximately 6 weeks before Drew Brees is back on the field for the Saints. And Cam Newton just looked heinous on Thursday Night Football. The Buccaneers are not a good football team. And I think the Falcons are looking at a serious opportunity to come away with this division and to really luck into a playoff spot out of the NFC South this year. For this episode, I have 2 bold predictions as my takeaways from Week 2. The first of which is this. The Ravens, Seahawks, and Bills are all 2-0, and everyone can get gung-ho happy. I saw someone put the Seahawks in the top 5 on their power rankings. I think it was NBC Sports, and I just started laughing. It's funny. But they're all 2-0, and none of the 3 of them are going to make the playoffs. The Ravens will not, because Lamar Jackson is not good enough moving forward. He is not accurate enough as a passer. They will not make the playoffs. The Seahawks will not do so because they're the 3rd best team in their division. The Niners are better than them. And the Rams are certainly much better than them. And the Bills just beat the 2 New York teams, and neither of them are very good. The Bills' success will also not be sustained. All 3 of these teams are 2-0 right now. But my, I guess, bold prediction, I think it's a pretty basic one, is that none of those 3 teams will make the playoffs this year. And my second bold prediction of the week is that Nick Foles is going to be hurt. He got hurt week 1. He's going to be out 10 to 12 weeks. My other bold prediction is that when he gets back, he's not going to have a job. Gardner Minshew is the human personification of swagger. He can throw the football. He's proven he can be mobile. You could see the Jags rally around them against a division rival on the road in a tough game against a good defense. And the Jaguars competed in that whole game. They were about this far on a Leonard Fournette 2-point conversion away from winning that football game. And I think that Minshew is only going to get better over the course of the season. And I think he takes Nick Foles' starting job as the starting quarterback of the Jacksonville Jaguars. My 6th takeaway of the week is this. The 49ers are legit. This offense is for real. Sean McVay is great, but Kyle Shanahan might be the best offensive mind in the NFL. The Niners, without Tevin Coleman, you saw 3 other running backs, Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson Jr., and Matt Breida, all just go crazy all over the Cincinnati Bengals. Deebo Samuel might be the best rookie receiver in this draft class. He looked great. The Niners go on the road and tag up the Bengals for 41 points, coming off a road win in Tampa Bay. Back-to-backs on the road are never easy. I get that it's against 2 bad teams, but it's still just what I see potential-wise for the 49ers offense moving forward. I think that out of the 2-0 teams in the NFC West, the Rams, Niners, and Seahawks all haven't lost a game. I think it goes Rams, 49ers, Seahawks. I see a lot more with the Niners moving forward. They have a much better front 7 than the Seahawks. They have the best pass rush in the division, arguably, and that includes a division that has the best defensive player in the NFL, Aaron Donald. But the Niners have 5 different guys that can get after the quarterback. They have weapons all over the place on offense. Kyle Shanahan is brilliant, and Jimmy Garoppolo looks really good. This team is a threat moving forward. 7th takeaway of the week is that the Eagles have to trade for a defensive back. Before the year started, I picked them to go to the Super Bowl, but I'm realizing for that to happen, this secondary has to improve. They look horrible through their first 2 games, giving up 380 passing yards to Case Keenum, and then letting Matt Ryan walk all over them. They don't tackle, they don't cover, the secondary is bad. Malcolm Jenkins and Rodney McLeod I actually think are fine at safety. Those 2 have been successful players in the past, so the more I'm looking at this team, I see a lot of stuff happening on the perimeter. I think these corners are horrible, and one name comes to mind, Xavier Howard. We just saw yesterday Mika Fitzpatrick get shipped out of Miami and to Pittsburgh. Xavier Howard is one of the last good players left on the Dolphins, and I think that this is a situation where the Eagles have to make a move for him. They need a defensive back. If it's not Xavier Howard, they can look elsewhere. I think that's probably the best fit. But they have to make a move. They have to improve their secondary, or else you're going to waste another year of a great offensive line, a great defensive line, and a great quarterback, and it's all not going to matter because this secondary is freaking horrible. My 8th takeaway is this. The AFC South is completely up for grabs. Gardner Minshew looked really good. Make no mistake, the Jags are 0-2, but that defense is really good. If they're able to retain Jalen Ramsey, obviously he requested a trade. If they can talk him out of that, keep him on the roster, that team is built to compete. I love Leonard Fournette. I like what they're able to do offensively. Like I said, Gardner Minshew, that kid's up to something. The Jaguars absolutely, even at 0-2, can compete. The Colts have the best offensive line in football. They're able to run the ball on just about anyone. Jacoby Brissett looked really good in the red zone against the Titans. Their front 7 is good. Darius Leonard is a beast, and their secondary actually played pretty well on Sunday. Obviously, it was against Marcus Mariota, who is not the best quarterback in the NFL. With that being said, I think the Colts can win the division. Obviously, Deshaun Watson is the best quarterback in the division now that Andrew Luck is retired, but they do a horrible job of protecting him. There's not much of a ground game at all in Houston, and there's huge gaps in their secondary. Obviously, I still love the pass rush, even without Jadeveon Clowney, with J.J. Watt and Whitney Merciless, but there's holes in the secondary, there's holes in the offensive line, and the Texans are very beatable moving forward, and even the Titans can win it. They've had 3 consecutive 9-7 seasons. Derrick Henry is a tank. They have a good offensive line. I'm not a big Mariota fan. I don't think that he's really improved much at all since he got to the NFL. After a really good second year in the league, he just sort of hasn't proved anything since then. I actually think that they need to consider moving off of him, as do the Bucs with Jameis. I know that they were the 1 and 2 picks, and it's kind of hard to part ways with that, but I think at some point the Titans have to make the move before this season, because I feel there's no real complete team in this division, but I also don't think there's any bad teams in this division. It's completely up for grabs, and any one of the 4 can win it. My 9th takeaway is this. The Miami Dolphins might be the worst team to ever step on a football field. They're horrible. Imagine actually giving up 102 points in the first 2 weeks of football season and only scoring 10. They're just awful, and then they're just trading away the only good players they have left. I sort of get the idea of tanking. We want to get a top pick. We want to have draft picks moving forward. They've done a good job of accumulating picks in return for the players they've given up. But at the same time, I mean, how do you come to terms and accept the product that's being put out on the field by this team week in, week out? It's just awful. I don't know how they're going to make it through 16 games or how they're going to put a fan in the seats. At this point, most of the seats being sold at Dolphins games, maybe people traveling to Miami for some sightseeing and to watch their football team win by 40 because they are just awful. This might be the worst football team ever. And my final takeaway is that the Saints and their fan base are a bunch of spoiled, entitled brats. They didn't get a call in the game. It should have been called a fumble. It should have been returned for a touchdown. I get it. In the NFC Championship game, was that pass interference? Yes. But a game is never won or lost on one play. The excuses are just absurd. The entitlement is absurd. The NFL catering to them and making rules for their crybaby bullcrap is absurd. The fact that I have to wait 5 minutes every other drive watching a game now, it feels like, because there's so many damn pass interferences being reviewed, is stupid. It's a subjective call. They missed one. Refs are human too. It's part of the game. They should seriously get over it. When the refs just stole a game from the Lions against the Cowboys in the playoffs, one that I felt was much, much, much worse officiated than the Lions-Rams game. There was a play in that one that was every bit as bad, where Eric Ebron was running a route, gets tackled by a linebacker on the Cowboys. They call pass interference, spot the ball, actually bring it back after Dez runs on the field to complain about the call without his helmet on. That play was much worse officiated than this one, and you didn't hear a damn peep from the NFL. Why? Because who cares about the Lions? They don't matter. But Drew Brees, the golden boy, the Saints franchise, and their loud, obnoxious fan base, oh, we gotta care about them. We gotta cater the rules to them. We gotta change rules so you can review subjective calls for them. And I'm just really sick and tired of it. I'm fed up from it. I think the Saints, the organization, their players, their fan base, I think that they're all a bunch of crybabies, and the entitled attitude is just really, really, really annoying. And the fact that the NFL is actually allowing it to happen and then catering the rules toward their bullcrap is just super, super, extremely disappointing for the NFL to do that. All right, that's going to be it for us today. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. I actually will be getting you my all-time 22 as compared to ESPN's. I meant to get it to you last Wednesday, but like I said, I was feeling under the weather. That's coming tomorrow, and make sure you tune in later in the week to my college football picks on Friday. We got a weekend packed full of good college football games, and then my NFL picks, which I'll release on Saturday night. Thanks for watching.